Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller. Your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
My mother's funeral was the first place my sister wore my engagement ring in public. Not on her finger. Had enough instinct to know that would have looked cruel even for her. She wore it on a thin gold chain, resting just above the neckline of a black silk dress I had once told her I wanted for my rehearsal dinner. I noticed the diamond when she leaned across my mother's open casket and whispered, "You can stop fighting now." Everyone else heard grief. I heard victory. The chapel smelled of lilies and wet wool. Rain dragged silver lines down the stained glass windows, and the microphone kept giving off a faint electrical hum. I sat in the front row between my father and an empty chair that should have belonged to Julian, my of 11 months. Julian stood behind. His hand rested at the small of her back. At first I told myself he was steadying her. Had always performed sorrow like a stage actress, one hand pressed to her mouth, shoulders shaking only after she was sure someone was watching. But then his thumb moved in a slow circle against her dress. It was the same thoughtless gesture he used to make against my spine when we stood in grocery lines. My father followed my stare and closed his hand around my wrist. "Not today." The pressure of his fingers was hard enough to hurt. His voice stayed soft enough to sound loving. I looked at him. "Why is she wearing my ring?" His jaw tightened. "Your mother is dead." As if that answered anything. The funeral director dimmed the lights for the video tribute. My mother had spent her last month recording messages, or so her nurse, Ruth, had told me. Vale did not believe in leaving rooms without controlling what people remembered. She had built Vale House from a rented office above a dry cleaner into the most feared crisis management firm in London and New York. Politicians, actors, CEOs. When their lives caught fire, my mother sold them a cleaner version of the smoke. I expected her face to appear on the screen. Instead, a montage began. Childhood photographs, on a pony, my father raising a champagne glass, Julian at last year's company gala. A single photograph of me flashed for less than 2 seconds. Cropped so tightly, my mother's hand on my shoulder had disappeared. Voice narrated it. "Mom believed family was the story we chose to protect." My stomach turned. That was not my mother's sentence. It was favorite excuse. When the lights came up, my father walked to the lectern. He thanked the mourners. He thanked the board. Then he said's final wish was that Vale House move forward without uncertainty. I felt something in the room shift. He called to stand beside him. She took Julian's hand. My father smiled through tears that never reached his eyes. In the middle of our loss, this family has also been given a reason to hope, and Julian have chosen to build a future together. For one impossible second, no one moved. Then someone gasped, someone else began to clap. The applause spread because wealthy people are trained to follow whatever is presented as inevitable. I stood, the pew knocked against the backs of my knees. Julian looked at me at last. His expression held no shame. Only exhaustion, carefully arranged to suggest I had forced him into this. Touched the ring on her chain. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she said. "You planned an announcement. Father stepped between us. Sit down before you embarrass your mother." I looked toward the casket. My mother's hands were folded over a string of pearls that did not belong to her. Her own pearls were around his throat. Every object in the room had been reassigned. My chair, my ring, my mother's voice. A security guard moved closer, pretending he was only adjusting his stance. That was when I understood. This was not a funeral where a betrayal had happened. The funeral was the betrayal. I picked up my coat and walked down the center aisle while 200 people watched me leave my mother behind. At the chapel doors, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "Do not let them cremate her until you find the red ledger." Then a second message arrived. The video THY played was not the one your mother made. I stood beneath the stone arch outside the chapel, rain needling my face, and read the messages until the words blurred. The number vanished when I tried to call. Not disconnected, simply unreachable, as though it had never existed. Behind me, the chapel doors opened. Warm light spilled onto the wet steps. Julian came out alone, carrying the umbrella I had bought him in Rome. I almost laughed. He used my name like a warning. He stopped several feet away. His black suit was immaculate. I could still picture his jacket hanging from the back of our bedroom chair 3 nights earlier, before he said he needed space to process death. He had kissed my forehead and taken one overnight bag. "You announced an engagement at my mother's funeral." It wasn't supposed to happen that way. You were standing at the lectern. Richard made the announcement, and you accidentally held her hand. His face hardened. You're doing it again. That phrase had become a trapdoor in our relationship. You're spiraling again. You're making connections that aren't there. You're turning pain into suspicion. Each time he said it, I found myself explaining my own mind to him until I sounded less certain than when I began. I opened the photograph had posted 10 minutes earlier. Her hand lay over Julian's chest. My ring glittered on the chain between them. The caption read, "Even in the darkest hour, love finds a way forward." "When did it start?" I asked. Julian looked toward the chapel windows. "This is not the place." "What?" "It's the place you chose." He exhaled. 6 weeks ago. My mother had been in hospice for 8. I held his gaze until he corrected himself. "Emotionally, maybe longer." "How much longer?" "Your mother was dying. You shut everyone out. You slept at the office. You treated me like an employee. You were the chief operating officer of my company. Your mother's company." The distinction landed harder than the affair. I had built Vale House's American division from 3 clients into 40% of its revenue. I had spent 9 years cleaning disasters my sister created at launch parties and charity boards. Yet in one sentence, Julian erased all of it. He stepped closer, "Was there for me. My sister comforted you because my mother was dying. She listened." A sound came from my throat that did not feel human. "Did she listen in our bed?" His eyes flickered. That was answer enough. The chapel door opened again. Appeared beneath the awning, protected from the rain by my father's arm. She studied me with the soft, wounded expression she had perfected as a child. Whenever she broke something, she cried before anyone could accuse her. "Please don't make this uglier." I pointed at the diamond around her neck. "Give me my ring." Her fingers closed around it. Julian said, "It was my grandmother's. You gave it to me, and I asked for it back." "No, you left a note on the kitchen counter saying you needed air." Tilted her head. He was afraid of how you'd react. My father descended 1 step. "Your behavior is proving his point." There it was, 3 voices building one reality. I could have screamed. That was what they expected. It would have justified the sympathetic looks, the security guard, the quiet story already spreading through the mourners. His difficult daughter had finally become unstable. Instead, I held out my hand. "Keep the ring," I said. "It suits stolen things." His mouth tightened. For the first time, I saw fear beneath the performance. Not because I had threatened her, because I had not broken. A black car pulled to the curb. My father guided toward it, but before she got in, she turned back. "The board meets tomorrow at 9, she said. "You don't need to come." "I'm a director." "Not anymore." Julian would not look at me. "My father did." "You signed the resignation yourself," he said. Then the car door closed, and my family drove away carrying a document I had never seen and a signature I had never given. At 8:43 the next morning, my stopped working. The red light above the reader blinked 3 times. Through the glass doors of Vale House, the receptionist saw me and looked down so quickly she nearly dropped her phone. I knocked. A security officer I had hired 2 years earlier came out with his hands folded in front of him. His name was Ben. I knew his wife had just finished chemotherapy. I had approved his paid leave. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vale." "Open the door." "I've been instructed not to." "By whom?" He swallowed. "The executive committee." I could see the boardroom from the lobby. My father sat at the head of the table, wore ivory. Julian stood behind her chair, one hand on the leather back, already occupying the space beside her. A courier arrived carrying an envelope. He checked my identification and handed it over while Ben watched. Inside was my resignation. The letter stated that grief and recurring episodes of impaired judgment made me unable to continue as managing director. It transferred my voting shares to a family trust controlled by Richard Vale and named interim chief executive. At the bottom was my signature. It was almost perfect. The loop in the M was right. The pressure marks looked natural. Even the small upward slash beneath the E had been from the contracts I signed in blue ink. But the date was wrong. According to the document, I had signed it at 4:10 p.m. on the previous Thursday, in my mother's hospital room. At 4:10 p.m., that day I had been in a pharmacy across town arguing with an insurance clerk about morphine. The receipt was still in my coat pocket. I held it against the glass, looked up. I raised the forged resignation beside the receipt. She smiled slowly, then turned her chair away. My phone rang. Gideon Shaw, the family solicitor. "Do not enter the building," he said without greeting. "You witnessed this signature." A pause. "Yes. You're lying. The situation is more complicated than you understand." "Forgery is not complicated." Your mother was concerned about your condition. My condition: acute grief, obsessive suspicion. There are notes from Dr. was the therapist Julian had urged me to see after I began suspecting someone was leaking client proposals. I had attended 4 sessions. I had never authorized her to share anything. What notes? I can't discuss privileged material. My therapy is privileged material. Another pause, longer this time. Someone had turned my private fears into corporate evidence. I looked through the glass again. Julian was speaking to the board. On the screen behind him was a slide titled Continuity and Risk. My face appeared beneath it. "They're using my medical records," I whispered. Gideon lowered his voice. "Go home. Did my mother authorize this? Go home. Was there a red ledger?" The silence became absolute. Then Gideon said, "Who told you that?" The line went dead. I left before Ben had to remove me. Our headquarters occupied a converted bank in Mayfair. My mother had kept the old vault beneath the building because she liked the symbolism. "People confess more readily in rooms designed to hold secrets," she used to say. The red ledger had to be there. I walked around the block, entered the next door, and sat where I could see the service alley. At 10:17, a facilities van arrived. 2 men carried sealed archive boxes from the rear entrance and loaded them into the van. At 10:23, came out holding a red leather book. I photographed her from behind the window. She paused before getting into the car and looked directly at me through the glass. There was no way she could have seen me from that distance. Yet she lifted the ledger to her lips and kissed its cover. Then she handed it to Julian. My phone buzzed with an email from Vale House Security. Subject: formal notice, theft of confidential client data. The message accused me of downloading files after my authority had been revoked. It ordered me to surrender all devices and warned that police had been contacted. Attached was a security image of a woman entering the server room at 2:11 that morning. She wore my coat. She had my hair. And when the image enlarged, she turned toward the camera with my face. The image was not a deepfake. That was my first thought because it was the least frightening possibility. Vale House had spent years managing synthetic scandals. I knew how light broke around an altered jawline, how compression hid seams, how cloned faces often failed at ears. The woman in the server room had my ears. She also had a small crescent scar beneath her left eyebrow, the result of pushing me through a conservatory window when we were 12. Only 3 people knew the access code to the server room: Julian, our head of security, and me. I forwarded the image to Grant, Vale House's former chief financial officer. Had resigned 6 months earlier after a private argument with my mother. At the time, told everyone he had been caught moving expenses between accounts. He called within 30 seconds. "Where are you?" "Home. Leave." I glanced toward the windows of my apartment. "Why?" "Because they're not trying to fire you. They're trying to construct you." The lobby buzzer sounded. 2 police officers stood downstairs with a Vale House attorney. I took the service stairs to the basement, slipped out through the garage, and met in a crowded station. He looked older than I remembered, his silver beard uneven, his eyes continuously tracking the entrances. I showed him the photograph. He enlarged the timestamp and smiled without humor. "They forgot the building clock runs 7 minutes fast." So this says 2:11, but the camera system logged 2:18. At 2:14, the north entrance alarm was disabled for maintenance. Whoever staged this needed 4 minutes to enter, cross the building, and reach the server room. What does that prove? Nothing by itself. But your mother made me audit physical access after someone photographed a client file last year. We installed a second camera in the smoke detector. Nobody knew except and me. My heart began to beat harder. "Do you still have access?" "No, but the backup streamed offsite for 72 hours. He opened a battered laptop. The hidden camera showed the same woman entering the server room. From above, the illusion collapsed. She wore a wig. The coat was mine, stolen from the hospice cloakroom. Latex covered the scar area. Her posture was too upright, her movements too sharp. Then she looked up. I watched my sister remove the wig and laugh at someone outside the frame. Julian stepped in after her. He carried my laptop bag. They kissed beneath the smoke detector. The time display continued to count. There are betrayals that cut and betrayals that cauterize. Seeing them together did not hurt the way I expected. It burned away the last soft explanation I had been saving for Julian. "How long?" I asked. Clicked another folder. 18 months of security clips appeared. Julian and in elevators after midnight. In the records room. Against the locked door of my office while I was upstairs presenting our growth plan to the board. The affair had begun 6 weeks after Julian proposed to me. He didn't leave you for her, said. He was with her when he chose you. I could not speak, closed the laptop halfway. They needed your voting shares and your access credentials. Engagement made both easier. Why would my mother allow it? She didn't, that's why I left. He told me that had discovered irregular payments routed through shell consultancies. The amounts were small at first, then larger, nearly $3 million over 2 years. Approved vendor invoices. Julian authorized cross-border transfers. My father signed the final releases. Confronted them. The next day, an anonymous complaint accused him of harassment and financial misconduct. My mother urged him to resign quietly, promising she would handle the rest. I thought she betrayed me, he said. Then she sent this. From his wallet, he removed a storage key wrapped in wax paper. On it, my mother had written a date and 4 words. When MARASTOPS apologizing. I stared at the handwriting. What's on it? The first half of the truth. And the second. Looked toward the window. A black sedan idled across the street. The red ledger, he said, which your sister now knows you're looking for. My phone lit with a video call from. I answered. She was standing inside my apartment. Behind her, 2 police officers searched my desk. Smiled into the camera. You really should have come home. Turned the camera toward my bedroom. A detective opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand and removed a silver flash drive I had never seen. There, said gently, that's the client archive you stole. You planted it. Her smile trembled with manufactured sadness. You're not well. One of the officers glanced toward the phone, lowered her voice. Tell me where you are, and I'll convince Dad not to press charges. Dad owns 12% of Vale House. He owns the board. Julian entered the frame carrying a stack of my journals. He did not look surprised to see me watching. You have no right to touch those. He opened one at random. March 7th. Sometimes I imagine Vale House burning just so no one else can have it. I remembered writing it after a 40-hour crisis shift. The next line was, then I sleep, wake up, and build it again. He tore that page free before the camera could see the rest. You planned this, I said. Julian's expression softened in the way it used to when he was about to tell me I had misunderstood my own pain. We planned to protect the company. Reached over and ended the call. You cannot argue your way out of a reality they rehearsed, he said. The sentence stung, because it sounded like something my mother would have said. We left through the station concourse and took 3 different trains before entering a rented office used above a locksmith's shop. There were no windows, only fluorescent lights and the metallic smell of cut keys. He inserted my mother's storage key into an offline computer. The drive contained invoices, internal messages, and audio files. The evidence was incomplete but damning. Julian had created 3 consultancies, sent them payments disguised as reputation research. My father moved the money into a property fund in Luxembourg. One folder was encrypted. Its name was 213. We tried birthdays, company dates, my mother's favorite quotation. Nothing worked. At 2:13 that afternoon, my phone rang. The caller identification displayed Mom. I froze so completely that answered for me. My mother's recorded voice filled the room. If you are hearing this, they did not play my message at the funeral. The air left my lungs. Her voice was weaker than I remembered, but unmistakably controlled. Every word sounded selected with a blade. I gave Ruth instructions to trigger this call 24 hours after my burial. If has taken the company, she will have used grief as evidence against you. Richard will call it stability. Julian will call it concern. They will all ask you to defend your sanity. Do not. Turned on a recorder. My mother continued. The red ledger is not an account book. It is a key. The cover contains a biometric strip linked to the archive I created. Without it, you have fragments. With it, you have everything. I pressed a fist to my mouth. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered, though the recording could not answer. Then it did. You will ask why I did not trust you sooner. The honest answer is that I trusted your endurance too much. I let you carry what I should have confronted. That is my failure, not yours. My knees weakened, pulled a chair beneath me. Their greatest weapon is your need to be believed by them, my mother said. Give it up. Facts do not become less true because liars vote against them. The recording clicked. A different voice appeared, S. It was muffled, as though captured from a hidden device. You sign tonight, she said. Or gets the medical file and she learns what you did. My mother answered, you would destroy her to punish me. Laughed. No, Mom, I learned from you. I'll let destroy herself. The call ended. The encrypted folder opened automatically. On the screen was a single video still. My mother in her hospice bed, looking straight into the camera. Beneath it was a timer, 72:00:00. 3 days. Read the message below it aloud. If the red ledger is not scanned before the timer expires, all archives will be permanently deleted. At that exact moment, sent me a photograph. The red ledger lay open inside a fireplace. A match burned between her fingers. Her text said, "Come to the house alone, or your mother's last words die with her." Our childhood home sat in behind iron gates my mother had painted black after 16th birthday. She said white gates invited people to imagine innocence. The timer on the archive reads 68 hours when I arrived. Waited 3 streets away with instructions to call the police if I did not return in 20 minutes. I left my phone recording inside my coat and entered through the kitchen door. Sat at the long dining table with the red ledger in front of her. The room was staged exactly as it had been for every family negotiation. Candles lit, wine breathing, my father's chair empty at the head. "You came alone?" she asked. "Yes." A small camera blinked beside the flowers. She wanted proof. Poured wine into my mother's crystal glasses. "Do you remember when you were 13, and Mom made us choose who would inherit this house? She never did that. She asked which one of us could protect it. You said houses didn't need protection. I said families did. You were 10. I was smarter. I remained standing. Give me the ledger." She touched its cover. "Apologize first." "For what?" "For spending your whole life acting like everything I have is something I took from you." I almost answered. Then I remembered my mother's warning, the need to be believed by them. "What do you want me to say?" Sighs sharpened. "That Julian chose me. He chose access." The smile left her face. I had found the nerve. She lifted the but did not drink. "He told me you were cold, that you kept score. That even when you loved someone, you made them feel indebted. And you found that attractive." I found it familiar. For a moment, something honest passed between us. We had both been raised by people who called control devotion. Then opened the ledger. The pages were blank. "The key is in the cover," I said. "So Mom told you. She also recorded you threatening her." Her fingers tightened. "Mom recorded everyone. What were you threatening to reveal?" Leaned back. "You really don't know." I said nothing. She studied me, disappointed by the absence of panic. "There was a night when you were 14. Mom had been drinking. You fell down the west stairs and split your eyebrow. She told everyone I pushed you. A cold pressure formed behind my ribs. You did push me. I was in Paris with Aunt." "That's impossible. Look at the school photographs. Look at the date." Memories shifted. My mother kneeling over me, blood on her hands, saying, "What have you done?" My father arriving later. Crying, insisting she had not been there. I had assumed she was lying because always lied. "She blamed you," I said. "She trained you to hate me." His voice did not rise. That made it worse. Years later, I found the hospital report. "Mom shoved you because you tried to take her keys. She was drunk enough to kill you. Dad buried it." I kept the report. The encrypted archive suddenly felt less like salvation, and more like a room with no safe corner. "So you blackmailed her?" "What?" "I asked her to correct the story. You asked for the company. I asked for what I was owed." She slid a document across the table. It was my resignation, the original, still bearing the forged signature. "Sign a new one willingly. State that grief caused confusion. Withdraw the forgery accusation. In return, you get the ledger and no criminal charges. And you keep Julian." Her laugh was quiet. "You still think he is the prize." The kitchen door opened behind me. Julian entered with 2 police officers, turned toward the camera, and let tears fill her eyes. "She broke in," she whispered. "She threatened to kill me." Then she shoved the ledger off the table. It landed in the fireplace. Flames climbed the red leather cover. I moved before the officers did. I grabbed the metal tongs beside the hearth and dragged the ledger from the flames. Burning leather stuck to my sleeve. One officer seized my shoulders while the other kicked the book onto the stone. Screamed as if I had attacked her. She said she'd burn the house. My recording phone was still in my coat, but Julian knew where I kept it. He pulled it free and dropped it into the wine. The screen went dark beneath the red surface. "You entered private property after being told not to," he said. "You came here to intimidate." I looked at the camera beside the flowers, then show them the footage. Crying stopped for half a second. The officers noticed. One of them, a woman named, removed the camera. "We will." Julian stepped toward her. "That equipment belongs to Vale House. It is evidence now." For the first time, the evening slipped outside his control. They took statements. Repeated that I had threatened her, but the camera showed otherwise. Julian claimed he had arrived only after receiving an emergency text. It also showed him standing in the kitchen doorway 3 minutes before accused me. No one was arrested. The ledger was placed in an evidence bag, charred but intact. Officer told me it might be released after forensic review. I told her a digital archive would be destroyed in less than 3 days without it. She looked at me with the exhausted patience reserved for people who sound unbelievable. Arrived pretending to be my solicitor. He spoke in calm, technical sentences, until agreed to let a forensic specialist scan the ledger without removing it from police custody. At the station, a technician examined the cover. "There's no biometric strip," he said. My stomach dropped. He passed the scanner over the leather twice. Nothing. Had switched it. Asked to inspect the binding. Near the spine he found fresh glue. The real cover had been cut away before I arrived. Was ahead of us again. When I left the station at dawn, 6 reporters waited outside. Vale House had issued a statement saying its former managing director was under investigation for theft, trespass, and threats against the new chief executive. My face filled their screens. A reporter shouted, "Did grief cause a psychological crisis?" Another called, "Did you try to burn your family home?" I walked through them without answering. By noon, 3 clients had publicly condemned me. By 2, my bank froze the business account I used for legal expenses. By 4, my landlord emailed that Vale House had terminated the corporate lease on my apartment. Julian called at 5. "You can still stop this." I stood in my kitchen surrounded by boxes. "How?" "Sign the statement, go somewhere quiet, get help. And the criminal charges. We'll ask the police to show compassion." "You mean she will withdraw the lie she told?" He sighed. "This is why loving you became impossible. The cruelty was so practiced that it no longer sounded personal. It sounded like copy he had tested." "Was any of it real?" I asked. A pause. Then Julian said, "You were useful." The line disconnected. I sat on the floor after that, not because his answer broke me, but because part of me had already known it and still wanted him to lie. At 11:58 that night, messaged me a photograph from the hidden camera archive. It showed Julian leaving my mother's hospice room 6 weeks earlier. Under his arm was a red leather cover. Behind him, barely visible in the reflection of the window, my mother was standing. Not bedridden, standing, and pointing a gun at his back. The weapon was not a gun. When enlarged the reflection, we saw the silver body of my mother's old dictaphone. She was holding it toward Julian, recording him as he left. The relief lasted only a second. The deeper question remained. Why had pretended she could not stand? Ruth Bell answered when she found us in office the next morning. My mother's nurse entered wearing a beige raincoat and carrying a canvas grocery bag. She locked the door behind her. "Could walk short distances until the final week," Ruth said. She did not want or Julian to know. Why? People confess beside the dying. They assume weakness cannot remember. From the grocery bag, Ruth removed 3 prescription boxes, a notebook, and one of my mother's silk scarves. The last item was a black envelope addressed to me. Inside was a card. "A performance is not a lie when your audience came to deceive you." Beneath the sentence, my mother had drawn a crown split down the middle. Ruth explained that had suspected the affair and theft almost a year earlier. She invited Julian to the hospice room alone, pretended to be sedated, and let him speak on the phone too. He described the forged resignation, the plan to release selected therapy notes, and the funeral announcement. She knew all this, I said, and still let it happen. She was building evidence. She was dying. She was also afraid. I had never heard anyone use that word about my mother. Ruth placed the notebook on the table. Every visit had been logged by time, medication level, and conversation. One entry was underlined. JC removed false red cover. Did not notice substitution. Looked up false. Ruth nodded. Knew he would search for it. The red ledger was bait. Then where is the real key? Ruth looked at the silk scarf. I unfolded it. Sewn into the hem was a narrow strip of flexible metal. The archive timer showed 46 hours. We scanned the strip. A prompt appeared. Voice verification required. My mother's voice was the password, but the system rejected every recording we had. Too compressed. Too much background noise. The funeral video would likely contain clean audio. The video had suppressed. Ruth said there had been one master copy on a memory card. Gave it to Gideon Shaw with written instructions to play it at the service. Gideon had lied. We found him at a private members club near James's, eating lunch alone beneath a portrait of a dead duke. When he saw us, all color left his face. "I can't help you." Sat opposite him. "You witnessed a forged signature." "I was coerced." By, Gideon looked at me, by your mother. That answer silenced us. He said had instructed him to authenticate the false resignation. She wanted to believe she had one control. The company's fraud insurance would not activate on suspicion. It required a completed transfer and documented loss. So my mother sacrificed me to trigger a policy, I asked. She believed the damage could be reversed. She let them call me insane. Gideon's eyes lowered. She believed you would survive it. The words hurt more than Julian's admission that I had been useful. Survival had always been my family's excuse for hurting me. Where is the funeral recording? I asked. Gideon removed a key from his pocket. Has the master, but made me keep the camera. He led us to his office safe. Inside was the camera my mother had used. The memory card slot was empty. Taped beneath the battery was a handwritten note. Mara, the person who betrayed you first is the only one who can open this. I thought the note meant my father. Ruth said nothing until I turned toward her. My mother pushed me down the stairs, I said. She blamed was that the first betrayal. Ruth's face answered before her voice did. No, she told me to ask about the New York expansion. 9 years earlier, I had joined Vale House as a junior account manager. I built the American division from a borrowed desk, sleeping in budget hotels and convincing clients that a 30-year-old woman with no famous surname could protect them. Or so I believed. Opened a file on his laptop. The original incorporation documents listed the division's founder as Vale. A later version, filed 8 months afterward, replaced my name with S. Your mother forged the amendment, he said. I stared at him. You knew. I processed it. The room seemed to tilt. He explained that my mother had promised it was temporary. Investors were uncomfortable backing an untested daughter. She said the shares would return to me after the division became profitable. They never did. Every year when I asked about equity, my mother said the timing was wrong. Every year I worked harder to prove I deserved what had already been mine. That was the first betrayal, said. I helped her steal your company before did. Anger came cleanly this time, without confusion. I had spent 3 days trying to rescue my mother's plan. Suddenly I wanted the archive to disappear. Ruth caught my hand before I closed the laptop. Knew you might choose to let it die, she said. That is why she left the choice to you. What choice? Whether to expose one set of liars or another. Yes, the cruelty of honesty was that it offered no comforting side. We used my voice to open the note's clue. The phrase, betrayed you first, matched a security question from the company's original incorporation account. When typed ELEANOR Vale, the camera connected to an internal recovery partition. A single clean audio file appeared. My mother said, I am Vale, founder of Vale House. The archive accepted her voice. Folders unlocked across the screen faster than we could read them. Banking records, hidden camera footage, copies of messages, Julian's shell companies, my father's approvals. Doctor. Statement admitting Julian had posed as my legal representative to obtain session summaries. And one folder titled MARA. Inside were the original New York shares, signed back to me 2 weeks before my mother died. There was also a confession. My mother looked into the camera without makeup, her face gray with illness. I taught both my daughters that love was a contest, she said. Learn to take, learn to earn. I rewarded the wound that made each of them useful. I stopped the video. The archive timer vanished. The files were safe, but had gone still. What? I asked. He pointed to a transaction log, 48 hours before the funeral. Someone had accessed the archive using my mother's credentials and everything. The location was my father's study. Richard already knew the evidence existed. A new message arrived from him. Come home tonight. I will tell you which daughter your mother intended to destroy. My father did not meet me at home. He sent a car to take me to Vale House. The building was empty except for the boardroom, where one lamp burned above the long table. Richard sat beneath my mother's portrait with 2 glasses of whiskey and a folder between them. You look like her, he said. I used to think that was a compliment. He pushed one glass toward me. I left it untouched. Richard opened the folder. Inside were photographs of at 17 entering a private clinic. A consent form, a birth record with the infant's name redacted. Had a child, he said. Your mother arranged an adoption. My breath caught. She never told me. She never wanted you to know. The father was the son of a client, married, 29. Had been a child. What did Mom do to him? What she always did, protected the client. The archive was not merely proof against. It contained evidence that my mother had concealed the exploitation of her own daughter to save a contract. That is what threatened to reveal, I said. Richard nodded, believed exposure would destroy the firm. And she survived. The family word again. My father said discovered the file 3 years earlier. From that moment, her theft was not only greed, it was punishment. She wanted to take the institution my mother had chosen over her. For one dangerous instant, I understood her. Then Richard showed me a second document. A non-disclosure agreement had signed last week in exchange for controlling shares. She sold the truth, he said, just as predicted. Why are you showing me this? Because the board will support you if you protect the company. He wanted me to release the evidence against, and Julian while burying my mother's crimes. I would regain Vale House, my reputation, and the life they had taken. In return, the exploited 17-year-old version of my sister would remain a secret. You chose at the funeral, I said. I chose the daughter who was winning. The answer was almost elegant in its ugliness. And now I am offering you the chance. I looked at my mother's portrait. Her painted eyes had followed me through every board meeting, every failure, every apology. All my life I had wanted the person in that frame to choose me. My father slid the whiskey closer. Your mother always believed you were stronger, he said. Prove her right. I stood. No. His smile faded. Do not confuse morality with power. I'm not. I'm refusing both versions of your bargain. I took photographs of the documents before he could close the folder. Richard rose slowly. If that adoption file becomes public, we'll say you released it. She might, and the board will believe her. They might. You will lose everything. I finally understood why Com frightened my family. They could negotiate with fear, guilt, and hunger. Acceptance gave them nothing to hold. At the door, my father called after me. Wedding is Saturday. I turned. He smiled again. She and Julian moved the date. Vale House is hosting it at the hotel. The board will announce their permanent appointments during the reception. My mother had designed the ballroom. I had planned to marry Julian there in October. Richard lifted his glass. Come, he said. Bring your evidence. Let us see which daughter tells the better story. Outside, waited in the car. I showed him the invitation that had appeared in my inbox. Across the top in gold letters were the names Celeste and Julian. Below them was the line I had written for my own wedding website. Some promises are worth making in public. Looked at me. You are not actually going. I watched the lights of Vale House reflected in the rain. Yes, I said, but I'm not bringing evidence. What are you bringing? The funeral. The funeral video was not enough. It proved fraud, coercion, and betrayal, but proof only works when people are willing to see it. Vale House had built its fortune teaching powerful clients how to make evidence look like revenge. Would call the video manipulated. Julian would call me obsessed. My father would arrange experts before the first reporter opened a notebook. We needed them to authenticate it themselves. Found the opening in Julian's shell companies. One consultancy had rented a private vault under the name Cross Strategic. The rental ended Sunday, the day after the wedding. What does he keep there? I asked. Something he plans to leave with. We entered through the loading dock, using credentials from a caterer, still loyal to me. The ballroom had already been transformed. Black roses climbed the columns. A gold monogram, C and J, hung above the dance floor, covering the place where my own initials had been measured. In the service corridor, disabled a camera for 90 seconds. I used my old executive code on the vault lift. It still worked. The private box contained passports, cash, and 2 one-way tickets to Singapore. Both were in Julian's name. The second passenger was not. It was Dr. Lena, my therapist. I stared at the ticket until the letters stopped making sense. Opened a document envelope. Inside were signed transfer orders moving the remaining stolen money from my father's property fund into an account controlled by Lena. Julian had built an exit behind SPAC. The therapist had not simply leaked my notes. She was his partner. A soft click sounded behind us. Lena stood in the vault doorway. She was smaller than I remembered, dressed in a gray coat, her expression composed with professional concern. She said, "This is exactly the kind of behavior we discussed." Raised his phone to record. Lena did not flinch. "You are trespassing in a secured area while constructing a conspiracy involving your family and former partner. You gave Julian my therapy notes. I gave a medical opinion to someone I believed held power of attorney. He forged it. That has not been established." I held up the airline ticket. Was Singapore part of my treatment plan? For the first time, her face changed. She stepped toward the box. Blocked her. Lena looked at me and spoke very softly. "Julian does not love your sister." "I know. He does not love me either." That surprised me more than a denial. "He loves exits," she said. He studies people until he knows which door they will hold open. Why help him? Because he has recordings of my sessions with clients. I won report for Vale House years ago. He found it and built a leash. She was not innocent, but she was afraid. I asked whether Julian had ordered her to diagnose me. No diagnosis, she said. Only language, hypervigilant, fixated, potentially unstable under acute stress. Words that sound clinical without making a claim. Every weapon had been chosen for deniability. What happened Saturday? I asked. Lena glanced at the camera, had disabled. Julian intends to provoke you during the reception. Security has instructions to let you reach the stage. When you try to play the video, the system will show altered footage, something that makes it appear you threatened. Police will arrest you in front of the board. My skin went cold. He wants her to believe he saved her, Lena continued. Then he leaves Sunday with the money. Why tell us? Because my ticket is leverage, not freedom. He will never let me board that plane. The vault documents while Lena watched. Before we left, she gave me a small audio recorder. Julian speaks openly in sessions, she said. He thinks listening is the same as loyalty. On the drive back, I played the newest file. Julian's voice filled the car. Thinks the wedding crowns her, he said. It is actually the cleanest place to bury and Richard at the same time. Then he laughed, and after Saturday, Vale House won't belong to either sister. Called me the next morning and asked to meet at our mother's grave. The cemetery was empty except for a groundskeeper cutting wet grass. She stood beneath a black umbrella in a cream coat, looking less like a grieving daughter than a bride practicing restraint. I heard you went to the hotel, she said. Julian tells you everything. He doesn't need to, security does. That meant he had already explained our presence. I wondered which lie he used. Placed white roses against the headstone. My mother's name was carved above the words she controlled the story. Father had chosen the inscription. I could not tell whether it was praise or accusation. I want this to stop, said. Then return the company. You never owned it. I owned New York. Her eyes flicked toward me. She did not know about the restored shares. I kept my face still. She said, sign the statement. I'll withdraw the complaint. You can keep your apartment and your reputation. I'll even give you a consulting contract. A job in the company I built. A generous one. The cruelty was deliberate. She needed me beneath her more than she needed me gone. I looked at the grave. You were right about the stairs. His fingers tightened on the umbrella handle. Mom pushed me, she blamed you. The wind moved through the yew trees. For once, my sister had no prepared expression. I'm sorry, I said. She laughed once sharply. You're sorry. I believed her. You watched them punish me for years. I was 14. So was I. You were 10. Her face crumpled, not theatrically. The child she had been appeared for half a second and vanished. She made Dad lock me in the blue room until I confessed, said. 3 days, meals left outside. Every time I said I wasn't there, he called me a liar. I had known about the blue room. I had believed it was for one night. I'm sorry, I repeated, stepped close enough that I could smell her perfume. Do you know what your apology is worth? Nothing. That answer stopped her. It doesn't return those days, I said. It doesn't excuse what you did to me. Both things can be true. She stared at me with naked hatred. My refusal to argue had taken away the only ending she understood. I took Julian because I wanted you to feel chosen second, she whispered. There it is. I took the company because Mom loved it more than either of us. And now you are marrying the man who helped her use both of us. He chose me. No, he chose the vault under. Her face emptied. I told her about Singapore, about Lena, about the transfer orders ending Sunday. Shook her head, but not with certainty. You're lying. Asked to see his passport. He keeps it at the apartment. No, box 417. The groundskeeper's machine stopped. Silence rushed around us. Turned away, breathing too fast. I could have shown her the recording. I could have asked her to join me. A part of me still wanted the old fantasy. 2 sisters finally facing the people who had trained them to hurt each other. Then she swung the umbrella and struck me across the face. The metal tip opened my cheek. You will not ruin this, she said. Blood ran warm beneath my jaw. Raised her phone and took a photograph. By the time I reached his car, the image was online with her caption. My sister attacked me at our mother's grave. I won't stay silent anymore. She had cropped the photograph so only the blood on my hand remained, making it look like hers. Then my phone rang. Officer said a warrant had been issued for my arrest. I did not run. Running would have completed the picture had painted. I went to the station with and surrendered before the afternoon news cycle could show police dragging me from a car. Officer watched the cemetery security footage 3 times. The camera was far away, but the umbrella strike was visible. So was taking the photograph while I held my face. Removed the handcuffs herself. "Your family creates a great deal of paperwork," she said. I showed her the hidden camera footage from the server room, the forged resignation, and Julian's vault documents. Explained the financial trail. Lena arrived with her own solicitor and confirmed the stolen therapy records. By evening, the theft case against me was suspended, but still controlled Vale House. Gideon met us outside the station carrying my mother's will. He looked as though he had not slept. "There is a codicil," he said. Ordered me not to reveal it until an independent authority determined there was credible evidence of fraud. His case number satisfied the condition. The codicil was only 2 pages. If any beneficiary obtained control through coercion, forgery, or concealment of material facts, all Vale family voting shares would transfer immediately to an employee trust for 90 days. During that period, the employees would elect an interim board and commission an external audit. My father and I would lose control together. "Mom knew," I said. "She suspected. She set a trap that removed all of us." Gideon nodded, including herself had she lived. The codicil had another condition. The transfer required public notice to the board and employees. Had designated her funeral message as that notice. Because the video had not been played, the transfer had never been activated. "Can we play it now?" asked. "At a formally convened Vale House event attended by a quorum of directors," Gideon said. "The wedding reception qualifies. The board meeting is embedded in the program. That was why my father invited me. He expected a fight over succession, not a clause that took the company from every Vale. We'll cut the screens," I said. "Then the notice fails." We needed the ballroom system, the board quorum, and an uninterrupted video. Lena gave us Julian's plan. At 9:20 p.m., after the first dance, he would provoke me toward the stage. At 9:22, the technicians would switch to the fabricated video. At 9:24, security would remove me. We decided to let him replace the fake file with my mother's authentic recording. Gideon arranged for 3 independent servers to stream it simultaneously. Could not participate in a private corporate dispute, but she assigned officers nearby because of the fraud investigation. Ruth would carry the original camera. The plan was almost complete when Gideon turned to me. "There is something else in the video." "What?" "Names the person who should lead the employee trust." "Me?" "No." The answer should not have hurt. It did. "Who?" Swore under his breath. Gideon explained that my mother had recorded the message before discovering's full role in the theft. She believed's anger came from injury, and that responsibility might reform her. "If the video plays unedited," he said, "your sister may gain temporary control again." My mother had built one final contradiction into the trap. Expose everything, and the same woman who forged my name could be handed the keys. Said we could cut that section. "No," I replied. He stared at me. "If I edit the truth to get the outcome I want, I become Vale House." I signed authorization to play the video in full. That night, someone broke into Gideon's office. They took the camera, the codicil, and every local copy of the recording. On the wall above his empty safe, written in my mother's red lipstick, were 6 words. "Only one daughter gets an ending." Arrived at my temporary hotel room at midnight wearing no makeup. For the first time in years, she looked like my sister. She placed Gideon's stolen camera on the bed. "You broke into his office," I said. "Julian did." She had confronted him about the vault. He everything, then showed her a message from me that I had never sent, offering him immunity if he helped destroy her. "He said you and Lena invented Singapore," said. Then I found the passports. She sat on the edge of the bed, still holding her wedding shoes in one hand. "Help me expose him," she said. "And father, later, the stolen money. We return enough to satisfy the audit." "Enough." Her eyes hardened. The wounded sister disappeared, the chief executive returned. His proposal was simple. We would play the sections of mother's video that implicated Julian and father. We would remove the codicil and any mention of fraud. She would remain CEO. I would receive New York and a public apology. It was everything I had wanted 2 days earlier. "No." She stared at me. "You would rather lose the company than share it with me. I would rather neither of us own what we learned to use as a weapon." "You sound like Mom." "Then listen carefully." I said no, stood and paced to the window. "You think employees will protect what we built? They will tear it apart, vote themselves bonuses, sell client lists. The firm needs a Vale. The firm needs fewer Vales." She turned. "I can still destroy you." "I know." I can release the adoption file and say you blackmailed me with it. I won't release it. No one will believe that. Maybe not. My calm enraged her more than refusal. She swept a lamp from the table. It struck the wall and shattered. I spent my whole life being punished for what she did to you, said. Then she leaves you the clean daughter's role and me the villain. I'm not clean. You always get to be sorry. The sentence landed because it was true. I had been allowed ignorance, had been forced into knowledge too young, and then had chosen to make everyone else pay. I picked up the camera. The full video plays tomorrow. If you do that, Julian's fake footage will play first. We replaced it. Smiled. No, you replaced a decoy. What? She explained that Julian had moved the real control system to a private broadcast unit parked beneath the hotel. The ballroom technicians could not override it. At 9:22, every screen would show whatever Julian selected. Where is the unit? Service garage, Bay 12. Why tell me? Because he thinks he is leaving with Lena. I want him to watch his exit burn. There was no alliance in her voice, only redirected revenge. Still, information did not become false because the source was cruel. Before leaving, paused at the door. Mom named me to lead the trust, didn't she? I did not answer. Her smile returned, fragile and triumphant. She always knew I was stronger. No, I said, she knew you needed to win. His face went still. Then she whispered, tomorrow I will, at 2:06 a.m., and I entered the service garage. Bay 12 was empty. On the concrete floor lay the burned remains of a broadcast unit. My phone rang from an unknown number. Julian said, you keep looking for the stage. Behind his voice, I heard the faint hum of an aircraft cabin. The show is already in the air. By 8 the next morning, Julian's photograph was on every airport watch list in Britain. He had not boarded a commercial flight. The sound on the call came from a recording, another staged exit. Police found his passport in the vault and Lena's ticket torn in half. He was still in London, refused to cancel the wedding. Guests arrived beneath black umbrellas, passing reporters and 2 unmarked police cars. The invitations had cost more than most people's annual rent. The flowers had been flown from Ecuador. She would rather marry an empty chair than admit she had been abandoned. At 6, she walked down the aisle alone. My father met her halfway and whispered something. She slapped him. The guests pretended not to see. Then the music restarted. Richard escorted her to the altar, where a hotel manager announced that Julian had been unavoidably delayed due to a family security matter. The ceremony became a reception without vows. I entered through the main doors in a dark green dress, my mother once called too severe. Conversation collapsed around me, stood beneath the gold monogram, smiling as if my arrival proved the event remained under her control. A strip of medical tape covered the bruise on her wrist where she had struck me with the umbrella. My father approached first. You should leave. You invited me. That was before you involved the police. That was before you knew I had evidence. His eyes moved toward my clutch. I had placed a harmless memory card inside, expecting him to search for it. He touched my elbow and guided me toward the bar. This confession will destroy her legacy, he said. Good. And yours. Maybe. He released me as if uncertainty were contagious. At 8:45, the board members moved into the ballroom for the scheduled succession vote. Gideon distributed replacement copies of the codicil, sat beside the employee representatives. Ruth held the original camera beneath her shawl. At 9:18, the lights dimmed. Took the stage. My family has endured a campaign of harassment during the most painful week of our lives, she began. Tonight, we choose love over bitterness. A screen descended behind her. At 9:20, she invited me forward, exactly as Julian had planned. Security opened a path. I walked to the stage while 200 guests lifted their phones, handed me a microphone. Tell them you're sorry. I looked at the audience. I am. Her smile widened. I'm sorry I spent years protecting people who mistook silence for permission. The screen flickered. Julian appeared. He was seated in my mother's old office at Vale House. Live. Good evening, he said. By now has told you a dramatic story about stolen companies, forged documents, and secret recordings. The ballroom doors locked. Men in security uniforms moved in front of the exits. They were not staff. Julian held up the real red biometric strip. I have the archive, he said. I also have every client's secret Vale House ever buried. A murmur became panic. He demanded $20 million and safe passage. If the board refused, he would release the company's confidential files publicly. If police entered the building, the upload would begin automatically. Turned toward me, all triumph gone. Julian smiled from the screen. One sister wanted love, one wanted justice. Their mother taught me the only thing that matters. He leaned closer to the camera. Control the room. Then Ruth whispered behind me, "He is not in office." I looked at the screen again. The clock on the wall ran 7 minutes fast, but the second hand was not moving. It was another recording, and beneath Julian's voice, almost hidden, I heard the bells of the kitchen lift. He was inside the hotel. The kitchen lift served 6 floors and stopped between them. I knew because I had designed crisis routes after a celebrity guest was trapped by photographers. There was a maintenance level between the ballroom and kitchens, cables, ventilation ducts, and an old projection room sealed behind a mirrored wall. Julian was broadcasting from there. I whispered the location to Officer through the emergency number hidden in my bracelet. Before she could respond, one of Julian's men saw my lips move. He crossed the stage, stepped between us. "She's speaking to me," she said. The man hesitated. Julian's voice came through his earpiece, too faint for me to hear. He reached for. She drove the heel of her shoe into his foot and struck his throat with the microphone. Chaos broke. Guests rushed the locked doors, pulled the fire alarm, triggering the hotel's mechanical release even though the electronic system remained compromised. Ruth dragged Gideon behind the board table, grabbed my hand. For one stunned second, we ran together. We entered the service corridor as Julian's hired guards pursued us, kicked off her shoes. The train of her wedding dress caught on a trolley, and she ripped the fabric free without slowing. "You always wanted to ruin my wedding," she gasped. "You made it efficient." She laughed, a wild, breathless sound from before we learned to hate each other. At the maintenance stair, she stopped. A steel gate blocked the projection level. The keypad required Julian's 6-digit code. Typed their wedding date. Rejected. She typed my birthday. Rejected. Then she entered the date our mother died. The gate opened. "He used death for everything," she said. The projection room was dark except for a wall of monitors. On them, Vale House's client archive uploaded toward a public server. 38%, 39%. Julian stood at the console with the biometric strip taped to his wrist. He looked almost relieved to see us. My 2 favorite liabilities. Moved first, cancel the upload. Transfer the company account. You already emptied it. Not the reserve fund. He needed live authorization, and my legacy security phrase. That was why he had kept both of us inside the hotel. Julian held a small remote. "Give me what I need, or every victim, witness, addict, affair, and settlement your family buried becomes public entertainment. You'll hurt innocent people," I said. He smiled. That sentence built Vale House. The upload reached 42%. Offered her hand to him. "Take me with you." I turned toward her. Her face had changed into the soft, adoring mask she used when she wanted someone to underestimate her. Julian did not. "You were never the exit," he said. Pain crossed her face, genuine and immediate. He had finally said the thing she had spent her whole life trying not to hear. Julian raised the remote, tore the engagement ring from the chain around her neck, and threw it at him. His eyes followed the diamond for half a second. I hit the emergency cutoff. The monitors went black. Julian struck me hard enough to send me against the console. Jumped on his back. He threw her into the wall, but she held onto his wrist and bit until he dropped the remote. The door burst open. Officer entered with armed police. Julian grabbed, pressing a broken piece of metal beneath her jaw. "Open the system," he ordered me. Blood ran down his neck. She looked at me. All our childhood passed through that look. The stairs, the blue room, stolen birthdays, borrowed dresses, every moment one of us survived by letting the other be blamed. "Don't," she said. For once chose to lose. I stepped away from the console, fired a stun round. Julian collapsed. The upload stopped at 43%. The public file was encrypted and incomplete. As police pulled him away, Julian laughed. "You still haven't played the video." From the ballroom below, my mother's voice rose through the speakers. Ruth had pressed play. We returned to the ballroom while my mother was speaking. Her face filled every screen. She sat upright in her hospice bed wearing a navy jacket, as though death were another board meeting she intended to control. "If this message is being played," she said, "then I am dead, and someone in my family has mistaken that for an opportunity." No one moved. Police stood beside the exits. Julian's guards were on the floor in restraints. Entered barefoot, her torn wedding dress streaked with dust and blood. My mother began with my father. She described the shell funds, the client bribes, and the night he locked a 10-year-old child in the blue room to force a false confession. Richard stared at the screen until his expression became strangely peaceful. Exposure had removed the work of pretending. Then addressed Julian. She played his own voice, planning the forged resignation and the affair. Documents showed how he had selected me for access while promising the company. A second recording revealed his plan to abandon her after the wedding. Stood beneath the monogram with her eyes closed. Then my mother turned to her. Pain explains the shape of your weapon. It does not excuse where you pointed it. The video showed forging my signature, stealing my coat, and threatening to release my medical records. Gasps moved through the room. She did not defend herself. Finally, my mother addressed me. I stole the New York division from you before any of them stole Vale House. I used your loyalty as free labor and called it trust. You were not difficult. You were useful, and I confused the two because usefulness was the only love I understood. I had imagined hearing an apology from her for years. It did not heal me. It did something quieter. It placed the wound in the correct hands. My mother confessed to pushing me down the stairs. She admitted blaming. She spoke of the client's adult son who exploited my underage sister and of the adoption she arranged to protect the firm. The room changed around. People who had judged her now looked away. The recording did not name the man, the child, or the clinic. My mother protected its privacy while exposing her own choice. Both my daughters learned that truth was something powerful people rationed, said, "So I will not ration it now." She explained the employee trust clause. All family voting shares would transfer for 90 days. An independent audit would decide what could be restored and what must be surrendered. Then came the section Gideon had warned me about. I nominate Vale to chair the transitional trust. Opened her eyes. A few board members began whispering. My mother continued. This nomination applies only if rejected coercion, refused stolen control, and played this message at my funeral exactly as instructed. The ballroom fell silent again. If she suppressed it, forged authority, or harmed to keep power, the nomination is void. The employees will choose their own chair. Gideon stared at the screen. He had never watched beyond the nomination. My mother had designed the temptation and the consequence. Looked at me. Did you know? No. For once, neither of us had controlled the ending. The video concluded with my mother removing her wedding ring. I spent my life controlling rooms because I was terrified of what people would see if I did not. They saw anyway. She placed the ring on the bedside table. To whoever leads Vale House next, do not protect the story. Protect the people trapped inside it. The screen went black. Nobody applauded. Truth did not arrive like victory. It arrived like smoke after an explosion, revealing which walls were still standing. Then the employee representatives rose. Walked to the lectern. "We have a quorum," he said. "The transfer is active. The Vale family no longer controls this company." My father lunged for the microphone. Officers stopped him, sat down on the edge of the stage, surrounded by the ruins of her wedding. She touched the ring still lying near the projection room stairs, then left it where it was. The emergency board meeting lasted until dawn. Richard demanded an injunction. His attorneys called the codicil coercive, the video prejudicial, and the employee trust an act of posthumous sabotage. Gideon produced notarized copies, medical reports, and 3 witnesses to my mother's signature. The vote was not close. Every family director was suspended. The employees elected to chair the trust, not me. I felt the old reflex rise, the need to prove I had earned the position. Then I let it pass. Justice was not the same as receiving everything I once believed was mine. The audit began immediately. By sunrise, investigators had frozen the Luxembourg Fund and Julian's accounts. Police charged him with fraud, blackmail, unlawful access, and conspiracy. The hired guards admitted he had paid them through one of the shell companies. Lena surrendered her license and agreed to testify. My father was arrested 2 days later after trying to leave through a private airfield. He told reporters he was the victim of hysterical daughters and a vindictive wife. No one from Vale House corrected him. Disappeared after the wedding. For 3 days, I imagined every possibility: flight, suicide, another performance. On the 4th morning, officer called. Had surrendered with the original adoption records and a complete map of the stolen funds. She asked for one thing in return: not immunity. Privacy for the child she had given up. The prosecutor could not promise it, but Vale House's independent counsel arranged sealed filings wherever the law allowed. The story belonged to only as far as she chose to tell it. I visited her before the charging hearing. She sat behind glass in a plain gray uniform. No pearls, no silk, no ring. "You won," she said through the telephone. "No, you have New York." The audit confirmed my restored shares, but the trust still controlled them during the review. I had not decided whether to keep them. "Julian is in custody," I said. "Father is charged, the company is safe." "Then what do you call that?" "An ending." Laughed bitterly. "You always did love cleaner words." She asked whether I hated her. "Yes," I said. The honesty startled us both. "I also know what happened to you was wrong. That doesn't make us even." "No. Will you forgive me?" I thought of my coat on her body, my face on the security camera, Julian's hand on her back at the funeral. I thought of the umbrella at the grave and her voice in the projection room saying, "Don't." "Not today." Nodded. It was the first answer I had ever given her that she did not try to negotiate. Before leaving, I placed a photograph against the glass. 2 girls stood at the gates of our childhood home. I was 14, my eyebrow bandaged. Was 10, staring angrily at the camera. "I found the date," I said. "You were in Paris." Her mouth twisted. "I told you." "I know." She pressed 2 fingers to the glass over the younger version of herself. At the hearing, pleaded guilty to fraud, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. She did not perform remorse. She did not blame me. When the judge asked why she had surrendered, she said, "Because losing was the first honest thing I had done." Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. I gave no statement. Vale House had issued enough statements for one family. That evening, called an employee meeting. More than 400 people joined from London and New York. He announced that after the audit, the company would permanently convert half the Vale shares into employee ownership. The other half included mine. A vote appeared on the screen. Should Vale return as managing director of the New York division? I closed my laptop before the result appeared. For the first time in my life, I wanted to know who I was before a room chose me. I spent 6 months away from Vale House. The company survived. That fact would have humiliated my mother and once terrified me. Instead, it felt like proof that no institution should depend on one family's wounds. Hired independent counselors for employees whose private lives had been buried in client files. The firm people affected by Julian's attempted leak. Some clients left. Others stayed because, for the first time, Vale House told the truth before being forced. The employee trust became permanent. My New York shares were restored, then diluted under the new structure. I kept enough to have a voice and gave the rest to a fund for junior staff. It was not sainthood, it was restitution. Many of them had built the division, while I accepted credit under a system designed to make one name look indispensable. The employees had voted for me to return. I declined the managing director role and accepted a 6-month advisory contract with no family title attached. My father's trial began in autumn. He sent me letters from custody, each one offering a different version of love. In one, he said he had only wanted to protect us. In another, he said had poisoned him against me. In the last, he wrote, "You are your mother's daughter. You will understand eventually." I returned the letter unopened after reading that line through the envelope. Julian pleaded not guilty until Lena's recordings were admitted. Then he accepted a sentence that would keep him away long enough for his face to stop appearing in my dreams. He tried to contact me once. His message said, "I did love you in my way." I deleted it. A predator's definition of love does not become precious because it is sincere. Received a reduced sentence for cooperation. She began writing to me after 3 months. Her first letters were accusations. Her 4th was an apology. Her 7th contained only a question. "Do you remember what Mom smelled like before she got sick?" I answered, "Cedar, coffee, and the orange hand cream she hid in the top drawer." We did not become sisters again. Not in the way stories prefer. Some bridges should not be rebuilt simply because both shores are lonely. But we stopped setting fires across the river. On the anniversary of the funeral, Ruth invited me to the hospice. She had kept one final package from my mother, scheduled for that date. Inside were 2 objects. The first was the original incorporation certificate for New York, with my name restored. The second was my engagement ring, had given it to Ruth before surrendering. The diamond was scratched from the projection room floor, but intact. There was no note from Julian, only one from my mother. "You will be tempted to turn every stolen thing into proof that you won. Some things are only evidence that you survived." I carried the ring to a jeweler. He asked whether I wanted the stone reset. "No." "Sell it." "No." I had the gold melted into a small, plain disc. On one side, I engraved the date I founded the New York division. On the other, the date I walked away from controlling it. I kept the diamond loose in a drawer. Value did not require display. That evening, I attended a Vale House event as a guest. The old portrait of my mother had been removed from the boardroom. In its place hung photographs of the first 100 employees, each the same size. Found me looking at the wall. "Do you regret not taking the company back?" he asked. "Sometimes." He smiled. "Good. People who never regret power usually wanted it for the wrong reason." Across the room, new managers argued over budgets and ethics. Nobody lowered their voice when I passed. The company had given back my name. It had also given back something I had not known was missing: the right to leave. A year after the wedding, I returned to my mother's grave alone. The headstone still said she controlled the story. I brought a chisel. It took nearly an hour to remove the words. The cemetery groundskeeper watched from a distance, decided grief had many forms, and left me to it. Beneath her name, I placed a small plaque. She finally told the truth. It was not forgiveness, it was accurate. Called from prison that afternoon. We were allowed 20 minutes. "They told me about the grave," she said. "News travels. You always were dramatic. You announced an engagement at a funeral." Fair. Her release hearing was 6 months away. She had begun working with a charity supporting girls exploited by older men. I did not know whether the work came from remorse, strategy, or both. People are rarely pure enough to offer only one motive. "Are you going back to Vale House?" she asked. "No, my contract ends Friday." "What will you do?" "Start something smaller, with your name on the door." I looked at the brass disc made from the ring, hanging from a cord at my desk. "No family names." Was quiet. Then she said, "I hated you because you could still believe Mom loved you. I hated you because you stopped needing to. I needed to. I just made everyone pay for it." That was the closest we came to explaining ourselves. Before the call ended, she asked whether I still had the diamond. "Yes." "Throw it away." "No." "Why keep something he gave you?" "Because it is a stone. It doesn't get to mean anything unless I decide." Laughed softly. "That sounds annoyingly healthy." Afterward, I sat in my car and listened to the funeral recording one final time. Not the whole thing, only the silence at the beginning. There were 11 seconds before my mother spoke. In those seconds, I could hear Ruth adjusting the camera, rain against the hospice window, and my mother taking one slow breath. For years, I had believed strength meant answering immediately, defending every accusation, correcting every lie, winning before anyone could replace me. My mother's silence taught me more than her confession. A pause is not surrender. Sometimes it is the moment you stop letting another person write your next sentence. I deleted the recording from my phone. The original remained sealed with the court and the employee trust. I no longer needed to carry my mother's voice everywhere I went. My new company opened the following Monday in 2 rented rooms above a bakery. We advised people leaving family businesses, coercive partnerships, and reputational traps. Our first client was a woman whose husband controlled every bank account and told their friends she was unstable. When she finished speaking, she asked, "Do you believe me?" The old Vale House answer would have been strategic. "What can we prove? Who controls the room? Which version survives?" I gave her the answer I had needed. "Yes." Then we began collecting facts, not to make her pain real, but to make it harder for others to profit from denying it. Outside, the bakery ovens warmed the floor. No portraits watched from the walls. No one carried my surname like a weapon. People often imagine justice as applause, handcuffs, a courtroom door closing. Those sounds came and went. Real justice was quieter. It was my key turning in a lock no one else owned. It was a phone that did not make my stomach drop. It was hearing my sister's voice without becoming 14 again. It was understanding that the people who took everything had not taken the part of me capable of beginning. My mother controlled stories, controlled wounds. Julian controlled exits. I spent years trying to control what they thought of me. Then I stopped, and in the silence they could no longer fill, my life finally sounded like mine.